And I want to point one person out. Carly Herndon, raise your hand and stand up. Carly is the current curator at the Grummond Children's Literature Collection, and I'm just thrilled that she is and that she's here. And I want to tell you just a little bit about the relationship with the Grummond Children's Literature Collection and the Ezra Jack Keats Award. And how many in this room have heard of Ezra Jack Keats? Man. And the book Snowy Day. Virginia, have you heard of Ezra Jack Keats? Virginia Butler has a book titled Becoming Ezra, all about Ezra Jack Keats, published by University of Mississippi Press, and it is wonderful. So she knows more than I do about Ezra Jack Keats and most things. But I wanted to just tell you that the Ezra Jack Keats Award is for new authors and new illustrators. By new, that doesn't mean Wynter just started writing 2 years ago. She's been writing, but she has to have had less than 4 published books to have been eligible to be a Keats winner or honor person. So what we have here, and it's a national award. Currently, I'm the chair of the committee, and Lord, if those books don't stop coming in, I think we have got at least 300 by now. And and I know they did last year. So, I think it was up to 400 something. So, you people were selected out of a large group. And I will tell you, I know how those meetings go. And the Ezra Jack Keats Award Committee is a little different from other award committees for books because illustrators and authors and librarians serve on the committee. And so it's fun because the librarians learn what the artists notice, things that maybe librarians wouldn't have noticed. And the authors and illustrators learn from a librarian's perspective. And it's a wonderful give and take. And actually, they, out of 400 something, I think probably 450, they narrow it down to this group. So we're so fortunate to have everybody here with us today. And the reason the award is at the Grummond Children's Literature Collection is because the Grummond Children's Literature Collection has the archive. It's the repository of Ezra Jack Keats' work, his art, his correspondence, his Caldecott Award-winning underwear. What? His lunch ticket. That's right. His underwear. He was given a pair of underwear when he got the Caldecott Award, and we have them. I mean, they were painted. The metal was painted on the underwear. So, and we have a very special relationship with the Ezra Jack Keats Foundation, but I want you to know, until 2012, the award was at the New York Public Library. And the New York Public Library had it taken away from them. And so the Grummond Collection is now the administrator of the Keats Award. So that's why we're a part of it. Do I need to add anything, Carly? Okay. So I want to start to my left. We've got Wynter, who will tell us first. She won the Ezra Jack Keats Award. You'll notice her book has a gold sticker on it for writing give us just a little overview of Nell Plants a Tree.
Sure. Nell Plants a Tree is a story of a young girl who takes the steps needed to plant a pecan tree. So we see it grow bigger and bigger over the course of the book, but we also go back and forth in time and see her descendants enjoying the tree in different ways. So it's kind of like a bit of a puzzle. It's a really good book to read again because it kind of all comes together and the timelines come together at the end. It's about family. It's about leaving a legacy for those after you, and it's about the beauty of trees.
It's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, okay. And now we have Sarah Gonzales, who is won the Keats Award for illustration. So, Sarah, tell us just a little bit about your book.
Yeah, so this is The Only Way to Make Bread by Christina Quintero, and I had the honor of illustrating this book about bread and the love of it, and the inner layers of it being about self-acceptance, and that the only way to make bread is your way. So
It's wonderful. And I love it too. And there's recipes in the back for
Yes.
arepas and the other.
pandesal.
Yes. So, and I want to, okay, and we'll keep going. The next one is, okay, I've got y'all in a different order. Where is it? Just Like Grandma. And that is Kim Rogers. And Kim won for the writing of Just Like Grandma. The illustrations are beautiful too. So tell us a little bit about that book.
Hi, everyone. First off, I want to say I'm so excited to be here. Last time for the Ezra Jack Keats Award ceremony, we were dodging tornadoes. This time it was hurricanes, so I'm so happy that we're all here together today. My book is called Just Like Grandma. It's illustrated by Julie Flett, and it was published by Heartdrum HarperCollins. It's the story about a young Wichita girl who wants to be just like her grandmother. This story is lyrically written, and for me, intergenerational relationships are so, so important to my tribe and to me personally. I had such wonderful relationships with my grandmothers, and I wanted to show that bond between a granddaughter and her grandmother in this book.
Wonderful. Yeah. And then last but not least, the one person I had not met, they were in Hattiesburg in April. That's right. It was a tornado, wasn't it? I forgot. So this is Sora Seashells by Helena Rhee. And Helena, tell us about your book.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ellen. I'm so happy to be here to echo Kim. My parents and I dodged a hurricane in New Orleans to be here. We've experienced plenty of earthquakes in Los Angeles, but never a hurricane, so it was a little exciting and scary for us, but I'm so happy to be here. So Sora Seashells is about a girl who gets a little bullied at school for her unique sounding name, but learns to stand up for her unique name thanks to the love of her grandmother. In the book, she learns that Sora means seashell in Korean, and her grandmother told her that finding a seashell at the beach is like receiving a wonderful gift. And the reason why I wrote this book, it's kind of like a heart book of mine, is because my name was actually not Helena at birth, it was my Korean name, and like Sora, I was bullied about that name at school, so I really wanted to change it. And so I wanted to actually write a book about a girl who learns to stand up for her name, what it might have been like if I stood up for my name.
I will say this. Every one of these books made me cry. Not in a bad way, in that beautiful way, and just talking about how a tree comes into the world and what it means. And bread, just such a beautiful thing. And I wanted to, one thing I've left out, I read about the illustrations on The Only Way to Make Bread, and it says in the book, the artwork in this book was created with colored pencils, edited digitally and baked until golden brown. So, and now, Sarah, did you bring some?
Yes, I actually brought some of my process, and I did bake this book in an oven, by the way. No. Yeah, I can kind of show a little bit right now, and I'll have them at the signing if anybody's interested in seeing them close up. But yeah, I can talk a little bit about the process.
Well, I'd love to hear. And, well, let me just say, did anybody collaborate with the illustrator of your book on this panel?
The illustrator, Daniel Miaris, he sent me a message on Instagram and asked if we could have a phone call. And I was like, ooh, I feel like we're breaking the rules, but we did it anyway. And it was really nice because we got to talk about why I wrote the book. But technically, yeah, you're not really supposed to do that. But I think it was okay to break the rules a little bit this time.
And for my process, I didn't have contact with the author during the process while I was illustrating, but I was sent references from her family and her friends just so that we could incorporate them as inspiration as part of this book.
I love that little magical thing. Yeah. And Kim,
Yeah, my editor had sent me initial sketches of the book, so I got to see in the very beginning, and then I was able to give feedback, and then I received the final pass. And it's funny because there was a snowstorm coming in Oklahoma, and so I was at the grocery store stocking up on food. And so my editor had emailed me, and I looked at the email in the car, and I thought, oh no, I've got to hurry and get my kids. I couldn't wait to read it. And she said, you're going to have to sit down when you see these illustrations, so you need to be somewhere alone. And so I went and got my groceries, and I did make a stop at Dunkin' Donuts on the way home for essential supplies. So I did that, and I went home, and I saw the sketches, and I just cried. And my agent called me, and we both just marveled and cried over the illustrations because they are just so stunning. I'm just so thrilled that Julie Flett was able to illustrate this book.
beautiful.
Yeah, so lots of weather-related drama on this panel. So as Anne mentioned, normally authors and illustrators are supposed to work separately. And the reason for that is I learned from an illustrator friend of mine that she actually quit a number of projects because the author kept exerting his or her opinion too much. So the publisher doesn't want the author butting into the illustration process too much. But my publisher was nice enough to forward me the initial sketches by G and Stella, who are masters at watercolor, which is why they were selected for Sora's Seashells. And it was actually the illustrators who decided to make my character Sora a mixed race child. So she's half Caucasian and half Asian. And I hadn't even thought of that while writing the story because the story is just purely based kind of on my own history. And so when I saw that, I thought, this is brilliant. It kind of expands the story a little bit more. So I really love that suggestion.
I loved it too, and I have chills going on my arms just thinking about that whole experience. I wanted to tell you guys, so it says that Nell plants a tree, pen and ink, gouache, and collage were used, and Sora's Seashells illustrations were in watercolor and finished digitally. We all have a little digital experience with them. And then Julie Flett used pastels and pencils and, does it say pencils? I can't read my own handwriting.
Yeah, I believe so.
Pastels and pencil.
Pastels and pencils, yes.
Just beautiful. Every book up here. And there is a theme, seemingly, with the grandmother. So I want to know, was this a personal story for those of you who wrote the book? And by the way, did you hear, by any chance, Kate DiCamillo talk about writing picture books and how hard it is? So let's talk a little bit about that. All right.
Yeah, I was really happy to hear that she
Yeah.
she said that, although from my perspective, novels are extremely hard. But yes, this book, so my grandmother, one of my grandmothers passed away before I was born. The other one passed away when I was really young. But I do have a few very faint memories of going to her house her and my grandfather's house that was out in the country, and we had a pecan tree in our front yard. The tree that's featured in this book is a pecan tree. We had a pecan tree. They had several pecan trees. It felt like everybody in my family had a pecan tree. I thought it was required at some point. And I remember going out there, and we had a ton of cousins, and everybody was doing something different. And I had my books with me because I just wanted to sit and read. And I remember my cousin Jonathan climbing a tree, and I remember looking at him and being really jealous because I wanted to climb a tree, but I was too scared. And so all of those memories kind of came back as I was writing this, just the variety of different things cousins can be doing at a grandparent's house, and especially if the house is out in the country, and how much fun that can be. So those, even though I do not have a lot of memories of my grandmother, I guess that was enough to spark something really rich.
Read just the first one or two pages.
Sure.
And I want you to show, if you don't mind, some of the illustrations too.
Yeah, Daniel Miaris, he's just such a beautiful illustrator. And actually, one thing I always do when I read this at schools is I ask if people think that this is Nell on the cover. And usually kids will say, yeah, that's definitely Nell. And I'll say, it's not Nell, but you'll know Nell because she wears a yellow dress, so look out for her. So, before a grip on a branch and a fall to the ground, and a scrape and a leap and a reach for the top. Before anyone finds out how high they can climb, and this is actually my favorite spread. Thank you. Nell picks up a seed, and they see Nell on this page, and they say, that's Nell, but you'll see her at different ages throughout the book. And actually, your earlier question about whether the illustrator and I had any sort of conversations, my editor asked about this character's hair at that time, being a kid who lived out in the country in a certain era. And I went back and I found an old picture of my aunt, and sent it to her, and she sent it to Daniel. And this picture looks almost exactly like that photograph of her. So that was really lovely.
Wow. Okay. And then Kim, is this a personal story?
This is not a personal story, but it is accumulation of all my grandmothers. They all hold a special place in my heart still to this day. They're no longer with us, but I wanted to honor each one of them. I was fortunate to know my great-grandmother, and we called her Mama May, and she was very spirited until her 80s. She went out dancing at the senior community center, and so this grandma is based a lot on her. She was very spunky, she was very sassy, and very feisty, and my mom and I both wanted to be like my Mama May, and so that's where that came from. And so, yeah.
It's wonderful. I love especially how she wants to be like Grandma, and she learns from Grandma and does the things Grandma teaches her, but then she teaches Grandma something. So we'll get to that in just a minute. And Helena.
Yes, this is definitely based
Yes.
on my personal history. And to circle back to the specific question about grandmothers, my parents are in the audience, but my paternal grandmother actually didn't seem to like kids very much. This book is not based on that grandma. It's actually based on my maternal grandmother, who adored me. My paternal grandmother lived in Los Angeles near us. I was afraid of her. But my maternal grandmother lived in South Korea, and every time we'd visit, it was like going home. Even though I was not terribly familiar with the country, she made us feel so welcomed. It was the prototypical image of grandma: good food, warm embrace, buying me my favorite treats. And so she passed early when I was a child, which is what happens with Sora in the story. So I wanted to pay tribute to her through the story.
I want to just say that I read that book. I had no idea what was going to happen. And oh my goodness, I cry every time. I cry with all of them. I do. Now, get to the bread baking. This is a personal story.
In a lot of many ways, especially for the author. drawing from her own childhood experiences and from myself as well. Growing up in Alberta and just being surrounded by family all the time, they were my inspiration for this book. The recipe that I resonated with is pandesal, which is a Filipino sweetbread roll. And yeah, I think of my titas in the kitchen, and they were all like baking the pandesal, preparing it. It takes a lot of hours to make and a lot of love, and us kids would just be like all over the place and just like waiting for the pandesal to come out of the oven, and when it would just be devoured, and just the bread is like the best fresh. So I just have a lot of warm memories growing up as a kid, being surrounded by my cousins, and yeah, so family is a very big part of illustrating this book.
And I love the community, the breaking of bread together.
Yes.
It has to be shared. So many wonderful things that children can relate to, because they've certainly had those things happen. Now, I want to just say, would you mind telling, since you've got my books that I was going to refer to, would y'all please tell who your publisher is and tell us where you're from?
The publisher of this book is HarperCollins, and I'm from Houston. I live in Austin, Texas.
This is published with Tundra, and they're an imprint of Penguin Random House, Canada. And I'm from Montreal, Quebec, Canada.
And just like Grandma was published by HarperCollins, and HeartDrum is a native imprint of HarperCollins, so it's a big deal for us to have our books published through this imprint. We're very excited. And I am from Oklahoma. I live in a town north of Oklahoma City called Edmond.
Sora's Seashells was published by Candlewick Press, and I'm from Los Angeles.
I didn't hear it.
Los Angeles.
And so you grew up in LA.
Yeah, I did.
Wow. And your parents, y'all flew into New Orleans.
We did. We experienced the hurricane and some beignets and lots of good stuff, some jazz. Yes. And
Well,
then we
that
drove
is-
here,
yeah.
and it was a beautiful drive, actually. Oh, and we stopped by the McCain collection to visit the Grummond collection. It was
Great.
It was very moving.
Yes, it is. It's
Yeah.
thrilling. So here's my question. Why did you decide, especially writers, because I think there's an obvious answer to this for you, but why did you decide the format of a picture book to tell your story?
I don't know how to write anything else. Even though I'm
That's
trying.
not true.
Okay, board books. I've published some board books, which are similar. I am trying to write novels, but it is hard. And so, for some reason, even growing up, whenever I had to write a paper and there was a word count that you had to reach, I was always under the word count. And I always had to fill in a bunch of other stuff and try a bunch of tricks to try to get it long enough. So when I came to picture books, I was really excited because writing very few words actually was a gift. But I do think being able to see the tree, being able to see the generations and all of just the details and extraordinary stuff that Daniel Miar has put into these illustrations, I think it just works so well in a picture book format to tell this particular story.
It's beautiful, yeah. Kim.
And for me, I've been writing poetry since I was in the first grade. I wrote my first poem because it was raining outside that day, and I remember how emotional that made me feel, and I wanted to put that on the page. And so my teacher had given us a worksheet, and I wrote the poem on there, and I drew a little picture of a little girl under an umbrella. And she got that, and she said, "Kim, I really like this. This is beautiful." And so she was my first writing cheerleader. And so poetry has always been a huge part of my life. It's the way I express myself. I try to write a poem every day. And picture books are poetry to me. And my first love is picture books. I love picture books so much. And even during the pandemic, I had a hard time reading at that time, but all I read was picture books. And picture books are for everybody, including adults. And they are so uplifting and encouraging, and it's just my love for picture books is why I wrote Just Like Grandma like that.
I think it's okay for me to say amen because we're in Galloway. But read just maybe the first 2 or 3
Sure.
pages.
And I don't have my glasses on, so bear with me.
Do you need me to read it?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Okay.
On the steps of a house at the end of the street, Becca watches Grandma bead and bead buckskin moccasins. More than anything, Becca wants to be just like Grandma. Let me try, Becca says. Grandma hands her a thick thread and a thin needle. Together, they bead until the sun dips below the tree line, and Grandpa calls them in for corn soup. I'll read one more page. Out the window of a house at the end of the street, Becca watches Grandma dance barefoot near the garden, spinning round and round and round like the most beautiful butterfly Becca has ever seen. More than anything, Becca wants to be just like Grandma.
It's wonderful. And food figures prominently in that book, and the men do the cooking, which was something I really liked. Okay, now, Helena, what about, do you think you can read a little bit?
Oh, of course. I'll just read the first couple of pages. Sora's grandmother, Haimani, visited from far away every summer. The day after she arrived, they took the bus to the beach, where they combed the shore for seashells together. And the reason why I put the word Haimani in here is because if you say it quietly to yourself, Haimani, Haimani, you've just spoken the Korean word for grandmother. They found shells with pale pink lines, others with smooth white ridges. Some were as big as Sora's hand, others as tiny as a button. Haimani chose the prettiest shell and tucked it into her pocket.
Wonderful, wonderful book. And well, all of them. I mean, I know I'm repeating myself over and over, but I was just struck by the quality of every single aspect of these books. That committee did a good job. Because, Carly, that committee did a good job. And I mean, I love the illustrations in all of them. The writing is beautiful. And I love that so much of it is about a different perspective, you know, from your own backgrounds and experiences. It was obvious that it was just meant to be. I don't even know how to say what I'm trying to say. But there was another question I had about this. So you've had 4 published books. Have you got something on the hopper?
Yes, I've had 7, but this was the 4th.
This was the 4th.
Yes. And so I have 2 little golden book biographies coming out this school years. I think about the year in the school year, not the calendar year. And then I have a book about Juneteenth coming out that is illustrated by Jerome Humphrey, who is also a previous Ezra Jack Keats honoree, I believe.
Yes, beautiful work. The Humphreys brothers. Tell me this, what are the little golden books? You said they're picture book biography?
Yes, one that comes out next month, that's soon, is about Willie Mays, and one in January is about Maya Angelou.
Wow, that's wonderful. I love picture book biographies because you can learn a lot in a very short period of time. What's the tale for you, Sarah?
What I'm working on next?
Yeah.
Yes. Actually, to follow along with biographies, I just last month I submitted the final art for this upcoming title in 2025 called Ablaze, and it's about Deanne Shulman. She's the nation's first female smoke jumper. I don't know if anybody here is aware of smoke jumping. It's crazy what they do. They're like superheroes when wildfires happen. They
Wait,
hop.
what are you saying?
Smoke jumpers?
Smoke?
Smoke jumpers. So when wildfires happen, they're like firefighters of the sky almost.
Right,
in a,
right,
In a
right.
sense, because they hop onto a plane and then they parachute down into like remote locations and they help prevent the spread of fires. So this was the first female smoke jumper, and she fought for equality in that industry. So I think this is a very important story and very timely with whatever, like all the wildfires happening out there in the world.
Yeah.
So keep an eye out for it in 2025.
Oh, that's thrilling, and I bet it's going to be gorgeous. I
As a
can't wait.
Californian, I will be looking out for your book.
Yes.
Lots
Yeah.
of wildflower fires out there.
Yeah, that's you've had the extremes, Helena,
Yeah.
from New Orleans to
Oh, yeah.
And Kim? What have you got?
So Just Like Grandma is my first book. My second book is called A Letter for Bob. It's also a picture book. It's illustrated by Jonathan Nelson. It's with Hartdrum HarperCollins. My third book is a picture book biography. It's called I Am Osage, How Clarence Tinker Became the First Native American General. That came out in February. And I have a poem coming out in an anthology. It's called The Mistakes That Made Us, and that is through Lerner Books. And there, I have a poem called Silent in there. And then in 2026, my fourth picture book comes out, and it's called Mother Earth Song. And it's basically an ode to Mother Earth. It's written in a lyrical poetry form. And I have a bunch of projects I'm working on that are unfinished, and I just need to finish them. So,
You're busy.
yes.
Well, do you mind just talking a little bit about Hartdrum? I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
So, do both author and illustrator have Native experience? What is
Yes, we
the
are
requirement, I
all
guess?
as far as I know, all of the authors and illustrators that create for Hartdrum are members of Native nations, which there are over 500 Native nations in the U.S. I'm not sure how many are in Canada, but they also publish from Canada. Cynthia Lytick Smith, along with my editor, Rosemary Brosnan, started the imprint. I know Ellen O, who started We Need Diverse Books. It was her idea. And I know that Sin was at a conference and they were having breakfast, and Ellen O asked Sin if she would be interested in doing it. And Sin wasn't quite so sure, but she took it on. And she and all of them have done such a wonderful job with Hartdrum.
Yeah, and they have with Cynthia, they've got a machine.
With Cynthia at the helm and Rosemary as well, this is just an awesome, awesome imprint, and I'm so excited and honored to be a part of it.
It's thrilling. And Helena,
Yes, so my fifth picture book will be Shoes Off, Please. That's the title, and it'll be published by Penguin Random House. And it's another childhood-based story because when I was a kid, we had the tradition of taking shoes off at my home. And it was such a chore to keep reminding all my friends in my apartment complex, take off your shoes before coming into our home. And of course, my mom would complain if we just ran in with our shoes on. So it's kind of humorous and also, I hope, pretty touching.
oh brother, touching again. Well, I want to ask, sometimes we have people who have questions or who have been in the picture book business, want to write a picture book. Are there any questions from the audience?
Any future writers?
I
Oh,
see a
there's-
hand.
Well, yes. So this one, it was inspired by my aunt, my Tita Paz, and I was so excited when I started working on this book, and was like, oh, she must have this like amazing family recipe for pandesal. And I asked one of my other cousins, her tita, but she would not give that recipe away. That one is like, she's going into the grave with that one. And I'm like, no. Hers are amazing. But with my tita Paz, when I messaged her, she was like, oh, Sarah, just go on Google, type in pandesal recipe, and it's the first thing that shows up. And I was like, oh, is it this one, the one by Kawaling Pinoy? And she was like, oh yeah, galing. Galing means good in Tagalog. And she was like, yeah, that's the one. So it's that recipe that we put in the book, and she just modified it a little bit by putting half milk and half water instead of a full cup of milk. So,
And there's a recipe for arepas in there.
yeah, also, so that one was for pandesal, and arepas is the family recipe of the writer Cristina Quintero, her parents' special recipe, and you should definitely try it. I've made it with her in person, and it's a lot of fun, especially with kids. They can get their hands in it because it feels like Play-Doh.
Look, can I see that book, please? This, I want you, because you asked that question, I feel the need, of course, everybody has end papers. Would y'all just mind holding up your books and showing what an illustrator has to come up with?
Doesn't have.
Well, but that is an artistic decision in and of itself, you know. Your art director decided because that beautiful color is on the cover. Yeah. So, you know, this is part of the whole book. It's called The End Papers. And so how did you do this?
So actually, I think I was supposed to do something else, and I got confused. I was like, okay, is it one or two? And then I think my designer, I ended up going with this one. I thought it was the one, but I think it's okay. I think this is what it was supposed to be in the anyways. But we wanted it to be colorful. That's what it was, and wanted to show it's not just like the people, but also the things that you use to bake. They're part of
The
they're part of the
utensils,
process.
yeah. I love it, and I wanted to show you because the illustrations are what she won the award for. They're just wonderful, and the words are the only way to make bread is like this. You always have to start with a counter or a table. Any clean counter or table will do. So I love it because it opens it up to all kinds of bread. And you see all different communities and what bread is made. And I also love what you guys did. And I don't know if this was you or the art director or the writer, where you spoke about the different breads,
Yes.
all these illustrations of the different breads and the people that brought those breads to mind. Like it would be a certain family or, is that right?
Yes. So I think it was the author, I believe. We worked with the editor and the designer, and we decided to put them like they were part of the process. So we wanted them to be recognized at the end because they were our inspiration for the book. So.
And then this is the end papers are the same, but this is, now why this? The dog eating the crumbs?
The dogs are part of the family too.
Because that's what, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's lovely.
Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful illustrations. I say that about every one of these books. Do you all have something that you want to say to the group? Is there something good, Kim?
Yeah, I'd like to say, as far as the foods in the book, the grandfather in the book was inspired by my dad. And you said before about men cooking. My dad is the main cook in my family.
I read that.
Yes. So he was the one always doing that. And as far as recipes, people have asked me for a recipe for fry bread because it's mentioned in the book. And it's funny because we don't give up our recipes either, but everyone in my tribe makes it differently. And everyone will say, no, mine's better than yours. No, mine's better than yours. And so it's just funny how we all do things differently. So I just wanted to say that.
I
So-
love that. And Kim, tell me, I can't, because I don't have the book in front of me. Corn soup, fry bread.
Ducats, and Ducats, a lot of elders make that dish, and it's basically a meat, any kind of meat. They usually use like a stew meat, and they make a roux out of it that makes a gravy. And so a lot of times when you go to a powwow, our powwows, there's a crock pot full of Ducats, and there's fry bread, and you dip the fry bread in the Ducats, or we have beans. So we make Indian tacos, that's what we call them. The elders say Indian, and that's what we say. We say native most of the time, but they make that as well. And you'll see corn soup at powwows. And then I also talk about pancakes for dinner in the book.
I saw
Because
that,
my
yeah.
family we had breakfast for dinner, and we still do that in our family. And so that's a fun thing to do with kids as well. Pancakes for dinner with bacon or sausage. In fact, it's making my mouth water just talking about that. I'm hungry. And I
I'm
talk
so
about
hungry.
fried chicken in here too. And so when I do school visits and all that, every time I read the book, my mouth waters every time I say fried chicken. Those two words elicit such an emotional response and just make you hungry when you're reading or listening to the book.
Yeah, I love that. And you have pecan pie in yours.
I do, yes. And my upcoming book, the Juneteenth book, my editor asked for a recipe, and I said, I think I could put a tea cake recipe in it. And I went to my family members and asked for tea cake recipes, but every time I made it, it didn't turn out very well. And I have a friend who's like a sister, and she makes the best tea cakes. And I was like, hey, what's your recipe? And she'd be like, oh, yeah, I'll get it to you soon. And I check back in. Hey, can I get the recipe? Yeah, I'll get it to you soon. And she just kept saying that, and I realized she was never going to tell me this recipe. But they are delicious. So that book actually does not have a recipe in it, unfortunately. But sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I am getting really hungry from this conversation.
Well, it's her fault for bringing up the. Yes, go ahead. Well, that's one of those difficult questions because it's usually handled by the publisher. And so, and they kind of read the text and think about the different illustrators, unless you write and illustrate, and what might work. Is that how that happened for you, Sarah?
Yeah, I believe the publisher came to Christina, the writer, with my portfolio, and they saw when I was in art school, I did this whole like gallery about ramen noodles, and after they saw that and the whole world that I built around it, I'm thankful that I did that because it like that idea stems from like just sitting in your room and thinking about, oh yeah, I love noodles so much. Why don't we just like make artwork around it? And so I lucked out, and they reached out to me, and I didn't talk with the writer beforehand, but knowing that they saw my work, I'm very grateful for that opportunity.
So the art director kind of has an eye, but there are people who try to find illustrators. Are you a writer? Yeah. Yeah. And you had a question?
Similar to Kim, I think it started with me thinking I wanted to be a poet. In early elementary school, we read a lot of Langston Hughes, and I was like, oh, I want to do this. I think this is really fun and exciting and beautiful. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to grow up to be a poet. And I wrote a poem that was published in our school newsletter about a mouse and a house. And that was just kind of the first thing, even before I got really into books, that captured my imagination and made me realize, oh, there's a person behind these poems, because they talked a lot about him and his life. So knowing that there was somebody who created these and was connected to these words was really exciting for me.
So for me, growing up, I think I always kind of struggled with English. It is my first language, but I was put in ESL just because in the household we would speak a mix of like Tagalog and English. And I think for me, I've always been a slow learner, and kind of my safe space was with paper and colored pencils and my art supplies, and that would be like a way for me to express myself and build worlds that I can just like get lost in for hours. And so especially like growing up with like 3 older siblings, and they're off, being like teenagers, much older, I would be by myself, always drawing, and it was my favorite thing to do. Is my earliest memories were of drawing, also of my mom. I'm left-handed, but she would always try to put my pencil on my right hand, but I'd always switch it back to my left hand. And I think growing up as well, like the art teachers always encouraging me to keep drawing. And honestly, like when I think about when I was in high school, I almost didn't get into art just because a lot of my family, they were in healthcare. One of my sisters is a nurse, dentist, and optometrist, and then I'm the artist in the family. They always say I had it easy, but honestly, being an artist is very hard. But I'm thankful that they've always been supportive since day one, even though I struggled a lot between choosing like a job that was practical or following my passion and just working really, really hard.
Do you know dentist, optometrist, did
And
you say?
nurse, yeah.
An artist? They all have IST.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
Yes.
I mean,
I already,
Okay.
yeah, go right ahead, Helena.
Yeah, so, growing up, my parents actually started off as night janitors when we first immigrated to the country. So we didn't have a lot of money. I probably had 2 picture books to my name. And so I'd read those over and over again. And my 3rd grade teacher was the one who said, why don't you try writing your own story? And unbeknownst to me, she entered my story, The Talking Chocolate Bar, into the school fiction contest, and it won. And I remember when I went back to my seat in the audience after collecting my ribbon on stage from the principal, my mom and my teacher were in the audience and they were crying. I'm sure they were just proud that I had won, but I thought, oh, my story is powerful. I want to be a writer when I grow up. And so I kept reading picture books even when I was in college. In college, it's kind of shameful to say you still read picture books, but as Kim mentioned, I agree that picture books are something for everybody, even grown-ups. And it's been very moving for me and my parents to travel through this part of the country, which we've never seen before. We went to the World War II Museum, the Civil Rights Museum this morning, and at each juncture, we're left with a sense of hope. And I think that's what picture books do. They give you a sense of hope. And so on dark days, I turn to picture books.
wonderful. That was a wonderful answer. And the fact, again, we heard Kate DiCamillo talk about giving children hope. Well, I think that is one of the most important things. And a picture book is also such a thing to be shared. I have a granddaughter, and books are to be shared. It's such a gift to the world. So I'm so glad to get to spend some time with you guys. Is there anything else? Because I think we're having to 5 minutes. I don't want to leave you feeling like you needed to say more.
I think there was a hand over there.
Oh, I missed it. Lynn.
Oh, I am sorry if I didn't say that. It's Wichita and affiliated tribes.
And the illustrator of your book is from,
She is from Canada, and she's Cray Metis.
isn't that interesting? That is an old friend of mine right there. Not because we're old, but yes.
Oh.
Yes. Oh, so
Yeah,
I
hold
could-
it up,
I could show-
Sarah.
show a few things.
We want to see.
Yeah,
This is the
it's like
kind
a
of
small
stuff that the
document.
Grummond collection loves, right, Carly?
Yeah, so I was actually thinking about from the Kate DiCamillo, the conversation you had and how she writes so many drafts, and that's the same with art too. I think for this book, I think I drew each layout like 4 or 5 times, so that's a lot. I'll show you where I started from. So I have here, these were my first thumbnails. So you can see, like, for me, I like to have all the thumbnails on one page. So I was thinking about this the other day, like, when you're in the ocean, you can't quite see the ocean. It's only in front of you, just like how you only see one spread and it's just that one. But then when you take a step out, you can see the whole ocean. So it's like, I can see everything. I can see how everything flows. I can see if I can put like a close-up versus like something more zoomed out. So I get a sense of the flow, the different perspectives I want to achieve. So there's that. And then I draw it again. I scan those in, and then I do another pass on that. And then after that, I do a digital sketch really quickly, and then I transfer that onto the final art paper that I'll be using. And then layer by layer, I add onto the drawing. And so, yeah, it's a step-by-step process that I go through. But you can see it's like very rough. There's no characteristics of the character. This scene is based on Hokkaido milk bread, and the perspective is opening the oven. And I worked on like getting this perspective with the designer, and it's one of my favorite spreads in the book. But it's a lot of drawing.
I love that one, and I love the
Yes.
one where everybody's looking in the cabinet.
Oh,
All
yes.
the faces are
The pantry.
I love
Yeah, I
that
love
perspective.
Yeah, so just thinking about exactly the different perspectives, like even the top-down view, right here. Just this kind of composition showcases that, everybody kind of has a countertop. It's the same sort of rectangular countertop, but then when you look into the details, everybody has like a different like utensil they're using based on like their culture and what type of bread they're making. A lot of little thoughts that go into making this. Yeah, and I can show you more later at the signing. I have my early sketches. I think the first thing that I did, I can go on and on about this, but the first thing I did, I was like, okay, a book about bread. Okay, let's eat bread. And then let's also just draw sketches of bread. And then I took all of this and then put it on a nice tray, buttered it up, and then, put it in the oven. And it was
You're
all
making me very hungry.
I know we need samples at your book signing.
Yes.